A ruthless MMA trainer thought he could humiliate a black janitor in front of his wealthy students, but what happened next shocked the entire world, and it didn't end in the ring. The mats of Iron Forge Academy gleamed under fluorescent lights, polished chrome and leather bags giving the place the look of a temple built for champions. 20 students, tech executives, influencers, kids of wealthy parents, watched their trainer strut across the floor like he owned not just the gym, but the air they breathed. Derek Stone, 35, tanned, muscles oiled with sweat, loved moments like this. His boot crashed into the side of a man stooped over a mop bucket. The thud echoed. Marcus Williams, the janitor, stumbled forward and crashed onto the wet mat, his hands scraping the surface as dirty water splashed across his faded uniform. "Clean faster," Derek barked, stepping over him like debris. "You're not here to stare at real fighters. You're here to keep the floor from smelling like a locker room." The laughter was nervous, thin. Some students smirked, others looked away. Sarah Martinez, the gym manager at the front desk, froze with her phone in hand, eyes darting between Derek and the man on the ground. She wanted to intervene, but she knew better. Derek signed her paychecks. Marcus lay still for a moment, breathing hard. He was 42, his frame strong but hidden under the shapeless uniform. He didn't shout back. He didn't curse. Instead, he pushed himself up slowly. His weathered hands pressed against the mat, his knees bent, and in one seamless movement he rose. Rivera, the old trainer leaning against the far wall, caught it. The way Marcus shifted his weight onto the balls of his feet. The straight line of his back. The reflexive guard position his hands almost formed before he forced them back to his sides. Rivera's eyes narrowed. That wasn't how a janitor got up after being knocked down. That was how a fighter stood. But no one else noticed. Derek smirked, circling Marcus like a predator toying with a wounded animal. "See? That's the problem with people like him. They think watching makes them part of this world." He kicked the mop handle across the floor. "Pick it up. You're not finished." Marcus bent to retrieve it without a word, the mop clattering in his grip. Students shifted uncomfortably. They weren't sure if they were supposed to laugh or feel pity. Derek filled the silence, his voice dripping condescension. "Remember, kids, in life there are fighters and there are cleaners. One gets glory, the other scrubs toilets." The words hung heavy in the humid air. Marcus squeezed the mop so tightly his knuckles whitened, but his face stayed calm, unreadable. He turned back to his work, sweeping across the same spot Derek had just kicked him onto. A puddle spread at his feet, a reflection of a man everyone thought invisible. Yet in that reflection there was something else. A steadiness. A patience. The eyes of someone who had seen worse than insults. Rivera crossed his arms, studying him. The students returned to their drills, punching bags and running laps, but the silence after the outburst lingered. Derek strutted to the center of the mat, already moving on, basking in his own authority. He didn't realize the moment he'd just created. To him it was another day of dominance, another reminder of who held power in Iron Forge Academy. To Marcus it was another scar layered on top of years of humiliation, endured not because he was weak, but because survival demanded it. And to Rivera, it was a warning. He'd been around too many fighters not to recognize muscle memory when it surfaced. He knew what he'd just seen. The janitor wasn't as harmless as Derek believed. When the last students filed out and the bright voices of the evening died down, the gym belonged to Marcus. He moved from station to station with his cart, wiping sweat from mirrors, gathering discarded wraps, emptying overflowing bins. The sound of mop water sloshing was the only rhythm in a place built for violence. He never complained. Every surface shone because he made it so. The cameras mounted high in the corners caught everything, but to the paying members, Marcus didn't exist. He was part of the background, as invisible as the posters plastered on the walls. Yet when the gym was quiet, his reflection sometimes betrayed him. The way his shoulders squared while polishing the glass. The way his feet shifted naturally into a balanced stance when he bent to clean the base of the heavy bags. Coach Rivera noticed. He had lingered after hours more than once, eyes narrowing at the strange precision of the janitor's movements. There was no wasted motion, no clumsy bend of the spine. Muscle memory, Rivera thought. The kind that only comes from years in the ring. Marcus never let anyone see more than shadows of it, but the old trainer's instincts told him this man carried a past that didn't match a mop and bucket. By midnight, Marcus wheeled the cart into the supply closet, locked the gym doors, and slipped into the Phoenix night. His old sedan rattled down cracked streets toward a small apartment complex on the edge of town. The place was tired, stucco peeling, porch lights burned out. Inside apartment 2B, a girl waited at a kitchen table covered in books and notebooks. Maya looked up when the door opened. 17 years old, sharp-eyed, carrying her mother's smile. She rose to hug him, then froze at the sight of his hand. A smear of blood marked his knuckles. "Dad, what happened?" she whispered. Marcus pulled his hand back quickly, shaking his head. "Just an accident at work. Nothing to worry about." But Maya knew better. She studied him the way children of hardship study everything, reading silence as easily as words. He rinsed his hands under the faucet, water running pink before disappearing down the drain. Then he sat across from her, smiling faintly as if nothing was wrong. Behind him, on the top shelf of a worn bookcase, a small box stayed hidden under a folded towel. Inside lay a pair of faded golden gloves, leather cracked with age, and a tarnished medal from regional championships 2 decades earlier. Beneath them rested a military patch and a photo of a younger Marcus in uniform, arm around a squad mate, both of them grinning with the reckless pride of men who thought they'd live forever. Marcus never opened that box when Maya was around. Tonight, when she went back to her homework, he stood in the kitchen staring at it, his hands still damp. Memories pressed against the lid like ghosts eager to breathe. He pushed the towel back in place and turned away. He had bills stacked on the counter, rent due in days, and Maya's college applications looming. The weight was relentless. Back at Iron Forge Academy, Rivera leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the spotless mats Marcus had left behind. He had coached fighters for 25 years and knew the look of discipline carved into bone. Janitors didn't carry themselves like that. Fighters did. Something told him the story of Marcus Williams was only beginning to unfold. The gym buzzed with energy that night, a full class lined up along the mats as Derek strutted in front of them, feeding on their attention. Tyler Harrison, his prize student, stood at the center, sweat dripping from his brow, trying to follow Derek's instructions. Derek demonstrated a rear naked choke defense, his chin tilted high, his arms wide, teaching Tyler to push back against pressure that left his neck dangerously exposed. "This is proper form," Derek announced, his voice loud enough to carry across the entire room. "Technique beats brute force. Always." The students nodded, some mimicking the stance, others pulling out their phones to record. From the corner, Marcus pushed his mop along the edge of the mats, silent, invisible. He had seen this exact mistake 100 times before. It was the flaw that had gotten Tyler choked out in his last amateur fight. His jaw tightened. His grip on the mop handle turned white. The words slipped out before he could stop them. "That's wrong." The sound wasn't loud, barely more than a whisper, but in the echo of the gym it cut through like a blade. Derek froze mid-demonstration. Heads turned. The mop handle stopped moving. Marcus felt every eye on him. "What did you say?" Derek's tone was sharp, amused and dangerous at once. Marcus shook his head quickly. "Nothing, sir." He tried to retreat back into silence, but Derek wasn't going to let it pass. The trainer stepped forward, chest puffed, voice dripping with mockery. "No, let's hear it. The janitor wants to teach us technique now. You think pushing a mop qualifies you to coach champions?" Nervous laughter rippled through the group. Tyler looked embarrassed, torn between loyalty to his coach and curiosity about the man who had just challenged him. Marcus kept his gaze low. "You're teaching him wrong," he said softly, but the words carried. "That defense will get him hurt." The air shifted. A murmur rolled through the students. Derek's face flushed red, a public challenge delivered in front of the very people who paid him to be an authority. His smile tightened into something brittle. "Show us, then," Derek said. He pointed to the heavy bag swaying in the corner. "Demonstrate for the class. Unless you're admitting you don't know what you're talking about." Marcus hesitated. He knew it was a trap. Refuse, and he looked like a fraud. Accept, and he revealed everything he had worked to keep hidden. His eyes flicked to Sarah at the desk, her phone halfway out of her pocket. To Rivera, watching intently from the shadows. To Tyler, bruised from a loss he didn't deserve. Marcus dropped the mop. He walked slowly to the bag, every step heavier than the last. He wrapped his fists, a ritual so familiar it was like breathing. Then he moved. A jab cracked the air like a whip. Cross. Hook. The bag jerked back 3 feet, chains rattling overhead. Another combination flowed like water, perfect footwork, flawless angles. The 100-pound bag swung violently, groaning under the impact. The room went silent. Students stared, mouths open, phones rising instinctively to capture what they were seeing. This wasn't the clumsy swinging of a hobbyist. This was mastery. Rivera's eyes lit up with recognition. Tyler's widened in awe. Derek's face went from red to purple, humiliation painted across every line. Marcus stepped back immediately, regret written on his features, wishing he could take it back. But it was too late. The truth had escaped, and everyone had seen it. The janitor wasn't invisible anymore. He was dangerous. And to Derek Stone, that made him a threat. The days that followed felt like a slow execution. Derek Stone didn't strike back with fists right away. He preferred to break people down piece by piece, the way he had built his reputation. During evening sessions, when the gym was most crowded, he called Marcus to the center of the mat. "Hold the pads," he ordered, his voice smooth enough to sound like a request, sharp enough to leave no room for refusal. Marcus hesitated, but the eyes of 20 students bore down on him. He slipped on the focus mitts and braced himself. Derek started light, showing combinations for the class. Jab, cross, hook. The crowd watched, thinking it was a harmless demonstration. But each punch landed harder, faster. Marcus absorbed the shock, his arms trembling under the impact. "See how I control the angle?" Derek explained loudly, his fists thudding against Marcus' hands. Then he began to miss on purpose. A hook glanced off Marcus' forearm. A cross slammed into his shoulder. The same shoulder that still carried an old military injury. Pain shot down his arm like fire. Marcus bit it back, jaw clenched, refusing to show weakness. Rivera, standing at the back, saw it. So did Sarah behind the desk, her eyes flicking nervously from Derek to Marcus. Derek smirked at the silence. "Oops. Better reflexes next time." The students laughed awkwardly, caught between loyalty to their coach and unease at the cruelty on display. Finally, a blow snapped too close, forcing Marcus to drop the pads. His right hand curled into a fist before he forced it open. Derek stepped in, voice dripping poison. "That's right. Walk away. Know your place." Marcus turned without a word, massaging his shoulder, retreating into the shadows of the gym. That should have been enough. But humiliation was never enough for Derek Stone. The following weekend, a video appeared on his Instagram. Grainy security footage of Marcus hitting the heavy bag during that single demonstration weeks earlier, the moment he had let slip his secret. Derek captioned it with mockery, "When the help thinks they can fight." #KnowYourPlace #humility #Ironforge Within hours the clip spread like wildfire. Comments poured in, ugly and gleeful. Stick to mopping. Janitor thinks he's Rocky. Hope he knows his daughter cleans too. By the end of the night, it had tens of thousands of views. At home, Maya found it. She sat on her bed with her phone trembling in her hands, scrolling through comments that stripped her father of his dignity. Her eyes filled with tears. When Marcus opened the door, he saw her shoulders shaking. "What's wrong, baby?" She turned the screen toward him. His own image stared back, every punch mocked, every movement turned into a punchline. She whispered, "Why don't you fight back?" Marcus had no answer. He sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the screen, his silence heavier than any words. Derek's plan was working. The students whispered behind Marcus' back now. Clients laughed when he walked past. Even strangers online had joined in, feeding on his shame. He had become a joke, and the joke was everywhere. Rivera saw the shift too. He watched Marcus mop the mats at closing time, moving slower, shoulders slumped. He noticed the way Marcus kept his head down, avoiding eye contact, like a man burying himself alive. But Rivera's instincts told him something else. This wasn't surrender. It was pressure building, like steam in a sealed pipe. Derek Stone thought he had destroyed the janitor's dignity. In truth, he had lit a fuse. The gym was empty, its mirrors dark, its machines silent. Only the low hum of the air conditioning filled the space. Marcus wheeled his cart into the corner and paused, his reflection staring back at him from the glass. For weeks he had swallowed every insult, every staged humiliation, every cruel laugh that echoed after Derek's viral video. But alone, with no eyes on him except the unblinking security cameras, he let the mask slip. He unwrapped a bundle hidden beneath paper towels on his cart. Old leather hand wraps, worn smooth with age. He wound them slowly around his fists, the ritual pulling him back into a life he had tried to bury. He stepped to the heavy bag. His first jab cracked the silence, sharp and fast. Then a cross, a hook, an uppercut. The bag jolted on its chain, swinging wildly under the force. His body moved like a machine finely tuned, muscle memory guiding combinations too precise for chance. He pivoted, slipped, countered against an invisible opponent, footwork flawless, balance perfect. It wasn't janitorial labor anymore. It was 20 years of boxing, military combatives, and martial arts compressed into every strike. The sound of leather against leather thundered through the empty gym. From the doorway, a voice whispered, "Holy hell." Marcus froze, sweat dripping down his face, chest heaving. Rivera stepped into the light, car keys still in his hand. He had returned for something he forgot and stumbled onto the truth. "How long?" he asked quietly. Marcus hesitated, then answered. "Golden Gloves champion. 4 years. Military combatives instructor. 8 more. 15 years training." Rivera stared, awe flickering in his tired eyes. "And now you mop floors for a man who doesn't know a proper stance." Marcus unwrapped his hands, shame heavy in his chest. "I need this job. Maya needs this job." Rivera stepped closer, voice low but firm. "Derek isn't going to stop. He'll push until you break, and then he'll fire you anyway. You think you're protecting your daughter, but what she sees is you letting him destroy you." Marcus flinched. He thought of Maya, tears streaming as she held up her phone, begging him to fight back. His silence that night had cut deeper than Derek's boot ever could. Rivera pulled out his phone, opening Derek's latest post, a mocking clip captioned with arrogance. "Challenge him. Right here. Right now. He won't back down in front of his followers. His ego won't let him." Marcus shook his head. "If I fight him, I lose everything. If I don't, I've already lost." He stared at the floor, torn between survival and dignity. Rivera's voice softened. "You're not just a janitor. You're a fighter who forgot himself. Show her who you really are. Marcus took the phone. He read the comments, each one uglier than the last, each one tearing at his daughter's pride. He thought of her words, "Why don't you fight back?" and felt something shift inside. His fingers hovered over the screen. At 3:47 a.m., under Derek's mocking post, a new comment appeared. Direct. Simple. A line in the sand. You want to settle this like men? Face me in the ring. Winner stays. Loser leaves Iron Forge. Unless you're afraid to fight someone who might actually fight back. Marcus Williams. By morning, hundreds of replies lit up the thread. Derek was tagged relentlessly. The students whispered. The forums buzzed. For the first time in years, Marcus wasn't invisible. He had just declared war. Friday night turned Iron Forge Academy into something it had never been before. The glossy mats and punching bags became a makeshift coliseum. Students packed shoulder to shoulder along the walls, phones raised high, live streams already broadcasting to thousands. The air was electric, a cocktail of sweat, anticipation, and bloodlust. Derek Stone bounced on his toes in the center, muscles pumped, jaw tight, a smile stretched across his face that didn't quite reach his eyes. He played to the cameras, shadowboxing, mouthing insults under his breath. Across the room, Marcus stepped quietly through the back door. No entourage. No fanfare. Just a man in plain black shorts and worn hand wraps, his eyes calm, his breathing steady. Coach Rivera stood at his side, placing a hand on his shoulder. Remember, he whispered, this isn't a fight. It's a lesson. Sarah Martinez stepped forward reluctantly, pressed into service as referee. 3 rounds, 3 minutes each, or until one can't continue. Touch gloves and keep it clean. Derek shoved his gloves forward, sneering. Hope you're ready to lose your job, janitor. Marcus met the gesture with a simple nod, quiet respect in his eyes. Then Sarah's voice rang out. Fight. Derek exploded forward, throwing wild haymakers meant to end it in seconds. The crowd roared as fists sliced through the air, but Marcus wasn't there. He slipped left, rolled under, stepped aside with the ease of a man moving through shadows. Each punch missed by inches, Derek's frustration mounting with every failed attempt. Marcus didn't throw a single counter. Not yet. He let Derek swing himself into exhaustion, conserving energy, breathing slow. By the end of the first round, Derek's chest heaved, sweat dripping, arms heavy. Marcus hadn't even broken a sweat. Phones captured it all. Why won't he fight? Derek gasped in his corner. Tyler, his student, whispered the truth, maybe because he doesn't need to. The second round began differently. Marcus stepped forward now, unleashing precision. A jab snapped Derek's head back. A cross landed flush on the chin. A hook dug deep into the ribs, folding him over. Every strike was clean, surgical, designed not to maim but to educate. The crowd erupted, disbelief spreading like wildfire. Derek, the alpha of Iron Forge, was being dismantled in front of his own empire. He staggered back to his corner, spit flying, eyes wide with panic. Rivera leaned close to Marcus. One more round. End it clean. The third round began with desperation. Derek charged recklessly, flinging everything he had left. His form was gone, defense shredded, every swing a gamble. Marcus read him like a book. When Derek wound up for an overhand right, Marcus stepped inside the arc, pivoted, and unleashed a left hook so precise it landed on the point of the jaw with the sound of a bat cracking a melon. Derek's body went limp before he hit the mat. The gym fell silent, the only sound the thud of his collapse. Phones froze mid-recording. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Marcus didn't raise his fists. He didn't celebrate. He dropped to one knee, checking Derek's pulse, steadying his breathing, treating the man who had tried to humiliate him with the care of a medic. Slowly, Derek's eyes fluttered open, dazed and broken. Marcus helped him sit up, speaking quietly. "You're all right." The crowd erupted. Cheers shook the walls, chants of Marcus' name rising over the roar of live streams. Hashtags were already flooding the internet, "Justice for Marcus." Derek Stone's reign had ended in seconds, shattered by the man he called nothing more than a janitor. And yet the knockout wasn't the real story. It was what Marcus did after. Where Derek had built his life on domination, Marcus had shown compassion. Where Derek had humiliated, Marcus had lifted up. That night, Iron Forge Academy learned what true strength looked like. By sunrise the knockout was everywhere. Clips of Derek Stone crumpling under Marcus's left hook flooded TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, each angle replayed in slow motion with captions calling it the punch heard around Phoenix. Hashtag Justice for Marcus trended globally, fighters and coaches sharing the footage with words like perfect technique and real strength. For one weekend, Marcus Williams was no longer invisible. He was a hero. But Derek Stone wasn't finished. On Monday morning he appeared on local television, jaw wrapped in gauze, voice low and trembling as he stared into the camera. "I tried to help him," he said softly, "but Marcus attacked me. I thought I was going to die." The station played carefully edited footage, the knockout punch isolated from the 3 rounds of provocation that came before. Derek looked into the lens like a man scarred for life. "All I ever wanted was to give him purpose. Instead he tried to kill me." Sympathy poured in from viewers who didn't know the full story. His Instagram follower count spiked. A GoFundMe for medical expenses raised tens of thousands in hours. By Tuesday at dawn, the sound of fists pounding the door jolted Marcus awake. He opened it to flashing lights and uniforms. Maya stood frozen as officers cuffed her father in the hallway, neighbors watching from cracked doors. "Dad," she cried, her voice breaking. Marcus looked back only once, eyes full of quiet apology, as he was led into the squad car. The image of him in handcuffs spread across social media within hours. The narrative shifted. Hashtag Justice for Derek surged, fueled by Derek's victim performance. Comment sections filled with words like violent criminal and dangerous man hiding behind janitor's clothes. Marcus's victory was being erased in real time. Maya refused to let it happen. That night she opened a new TikTok account and stared into the camera. "My dad is the most gentle man I know. He worked nights cleaning that gym to pay for my school clothes and for my mom's medical bills before she died. Derek Stone tortured him every day for 3 years. He didn't fight because he wanted to. He fought because Derek left him no choice." The video exploded, 3 million views in 2 days. Maya showed her father's old golden gloves, his military photos, his volunteer work with kids before financial hardship forced him into janitorial work. She made her father human again. Supporters rallied. Hashtags clashed across the internet, one side calling for prison, the other demanding justice. Still, Derek had the law on his side. His lawyer framed Marcus as a trained killer who concealed his violent past, a man too dangerous to walk free. For a moment, it looked like Derek's version might win. Then Rivera made his choice. Late one night, he sat in his kitchen with his phone, scrolling through hours of recordings he had made in secret. Derek's voice filled the room, mocking Marcus, calling him boy, bragging about pushing him until he snapped. Rivera uploaded 17 minutes of audio to a private channel and sent the link to Maya with a simple message: "Your father is a good man. Use this." Maya listened with trembling hands as Derek's true voice spilled into the world, threats, slurs, promises to break Marcus down until he quit. Within hours the evidence spread like wildfire. Hashtag Justice for Marcus roared back with undeniable force. News anchors played the clips in full, the mask ripped from Derek's carefully crafted persona. What had been humiliation turned into exposure, what had been defeat became a turning point. Derek thought he had buried Marcus under the weight of police, lawyers, and public opinion. Instead, the tide was shifting. The fight was no longer in the ring. It was in the court of public truth. And this time, Marcus had an army standing behind him. The courthouse in downtown Phoenix looked more like an arena that morning than a place of law. Media vans lined the street, cameras mounted on tripods, reporters jostling for position as protesters filled the sidewalks. One side held signs reading "Justice for Derek," faces red with outrage. The other side waved placards for "Justice for Marcus," their chants echoing off the stone walls. Inside, the gallery overflowed. Students from Iron Forge Academy sat shoulder to shoulder with strangers who had never met Marcus but had watched his fight 100 times online. The air was thick with tension, every eye fixed on the defense table where Marcus Williams sat in a plain suit, his daughter's hand clenched in his. He did not look like a criminal. He looked like a man carrying the weight of years in silence. Across the aisle, Derek Stone arrived with his lawyer. He wore a neck brace, moved gingerly, and spoke softly to cameras that followed him into the courtroom. He looked every bit the victim, the man beaten down by the janitor who snapped. But the facade cracked as soon as testimony began. The prosecution painted Marcus as a trained fighter who concealed his past and used lethal force against an amateur. Derek took the stand, voice trembling, describing how he had tried to mentor Marcus, how the fight was supposed to be a demonstration, how he had feared for his life. He looked directly at the jury, eyes wet, words measured. For a moment, it almost worked. Then Jennifer Walsh, Marcus's attorney, rose for cross-examination. She played the first audio clip Rivera had given Maya. Derek's voice filled the courtroom, no longer calm and gentle but cruel and mocking. "I'm going to break him down until he quits or does something stupid," the recording blared. The gallery erupted in whispers. Walsh pressed on. "Is that your voice, Mr. Stone?" Derek shifted in his seat, jaw tight. "I don't recall." More recordings followed. Derek calling Marcus boy. Derek bragging about humiliating him in front of students. Derek laughing about posting the viral video to ruin his dignity. The jury watched his composure crumble piece by piece. Walsh leaned forward. "You wanted him to break, didn't you? You engineered it." Derek's face turned red. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean when you said, and I quote, 'I'll make sure he never finds work in this town again'?" Derek's mask shattered. He slammed a hand on the rail, voice rising. He was nothing. A janitor pretending to be a fighter. People like him always think they deserve more than they earn. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The words hung heavy, dripping with contempt, the ugly truth revealed in public. The judge banged her gavel for order, but it was too late. The jury had seen everything they needed. When Marcus finally took the stand, he didn't raise his voice. He spoke with quiet dignity. He told them about cleaning up water Derek had kicked over on purpose. About working double shifts to keep Maya clothed and fed. About swallowing every insult for 3 years because pride couldn't put food on the table. He paused, glanced at his daughter, and said, "I endured it all because Maya needed me more than I needed revenge." Silence fell. Even the reporters lowered their pens. When the jury returned less than an hour later, the verdict was swift. Not guilty. Cheers erupted in the gallery, Maya sobbing into her father's shoulder as strangers chanted his name. The judge went further, ordering Derek Stone to pay $75,000 in damages for harassment and emotional distress. Derek's face drained of color. The empire he had built on dominance was collapsing around him. Sponsors cut ties within days. Iron Forge expelled him permanently. His once booming social media following abandoned him, leaving him shouting into the void. Marcus walked out of court a free man, but he carried something more than freedom. He carried purpose. With his settlement money and donations from supporters, he opened Second Chance Defense Academy in a modest warehouse downtown. It wasn't about glory. It was about teaching self-defense, conflict de-escalation, and what he called warrior ethics. Students of every age and background walked through the doors, from children bullied at school to women seeking protection, to veterans searching for belonging. Marcus taught them all the same lesson: true strength is measured by what you protect, not what you destroy. Maya became the Academy's voice online, her videos of her father teaching with patience and humility going viral week after week. She earned a scholarship, became the first in her family to attend college, and built her future on the dignity her father had fought to protect. Rivera joined as head trainer, finding new life in the mission. Even Tyler Harrison, Derek's former protege, enrolled to learn what real instruction felt like. The academy grew, its message spreading far beyond Phoenix. Other gyms adopted Marcus's code. Anti-harassment policies became the standard. The International Mixed Martial Arts Federation recognized him for changing the culture of combat sports. A year after the fight, Marcus stood in the center of his own academy watching children spar with laughter, watching parents smile with relief, watching respect bloom where humiliation once lived. On the wall above the mats hung a plaque that read, "Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimates." Derek Stone, once the self-proclaimed king of Iron Forge, lived in obscurity now, a cautionary tale whispered in business ethics classes and fighter circles. Marcus Williams had won more than a fight. He had turned years of silence into a movement, humiliation into dignity, pain into purpose. He hadn't just beaten Derek Stone. He had beaten a system that let men like Derek thrive. And in doing so, he left behind a legacy his daughter, and the world, would never forget. If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.